Hi, I'm Nil Doналд Walsh, and I wrote a book called Conversations with God. Those books have been read around the world by people everywhere. And right now, I think that there are people who are asking about the messages of Conversations with God and how they can be applied to what's going on in the world right now. I'm speaking, of course, of the coronavirus and the effect it's having on our global population. And I wanted to look at this unique event through the lens of Conversations with God, really take a close examination of what some of those messages are and how they can have additional meaning um, in this context. I'm making this video from my home, as you can probably see, and sending it to the internet with our marvelous technologies that we have available to us these days. So thanks for being with me. And I want you to know that I consider that what I want to share with you now won't take just a few minutes, but it's important enough to me that I actually wrote it out here on paper, because I didn't want to try to memorize all of this or maybe not get in all the points I want to make. So with your permission, I'm going to try to read this as quickly and as easily as I can and share with you what I've written about this experience that we're now going through. The unique point of view of Conversations with God offers each of us, as I said a minute ago, a new lens, a very empowering new way with which to focus on this particular moment in human history. It answers two questions at once from a spiritual point of view. First, from that same spiritual point of view, what's going on here? What's happening now? And secondly, from that same point of view, what is our most helpful, our most meaningful and effective response? Let's begin with this. Conversations with God tells us that all creation is collaborative. That is, we are uniting with each other in a co-jointly created reality. In other words, our entire species is collectively creating, and has been from the very beginning, its collective experience. The question is, especially with regard to negative experiences that touch all of us in negative ways, like terrible wars, widespread poverty, rampant injustice, and now this global pandemic, the question is, why would we? Why would we join together in creating such experiences? My understanding from CWG is that the answer is our collective creation serves our collective agenda. Let me repeat that. Our collective creation serves our collective agenda, and the agenda of humanity, I'm told in Conversations with God, is the same as the agenda of every soul of every sentient being in the cosmos. Every species in the universe is seeking to evolve, allowing every individuation of divinity the opportunity to express and to experience its true nature. Now, we don't have to create horrific events in order to do that, but the youngest and most immature of the species in the cosmos have not yet come to understand what I've just said. And so, although events that we are experiencing now have the potential of moving us rapidly forward in that process, we're still producing events that more highly evolved beings, perhaps elsewhere in the cosmos, are no longer generating for themselves. I'm speaking not just of events like this pandemic, which of course was created inadvertently, but what we would call financial, political, social events of a wide variety that we see every day on this planet. First and foremost, the message of Conversations with God that rings in my ears whenever I think of CWG's dialogue, the most important message of the entire dialogue, the message that appears in the first chapter of the first of 9 books, is we are all one. And there's little doubt that the pandemic that we have inadvertently created has produced an opportunity for us to know and to experience that truth in a life-changing, civilization-altering way. If we use this event productively. That's the spiritual significance of what is now occurring and the best response to it. The differences between us, what allows us to know that we are all one, those differences that we have imagined exists between us are melting away by the hour. As we see rich and poor, young and old, female and male, gay and straight, dark-skinned and light-skinned, conservative and liberal, God-loving and God-denying, all of us, whatever category we fall into, are suddenly experiencing that something is happening that is affecting them, and it's also affecting us. So the differences between them and us are in fact disappearing, because what's affecting them is affecting us in exactly the same way at exactly the same time. This has rarely happened before in human history. This is a rare event in human history. And we are using this major spiritual event, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously, to decide and to define who we are. Now, what is encouraging to me is to witness that most of us are revealing the grandest part of ourselves right now. Most people are displaying compassion and understanding, empathy and concern, solicitude and sensitivity, tenderness and tolerance. We're not seeing a lot of indifference or a great deal of cruelty emerging from very many people. The worldwide pandemic is inviting us to remember the words of Abraham Lincoln, the words he spoke in his first inaugural address. Perhaps you don't remember these words precisely, but I'm sure you've heard them before in your history classes in school. Here's what he said in his first inaugural address, and here's what the present experience on earth is inviting us to remember. He said, "We are not enemies, but friends, and we must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell again within us when we are touched again, as surely as we will be by the better angels of our nature." We're being touched right now, my wonderful friends, by the better angels of our nature. And we are being invited by the mystic chord of our memory to remember who we really are, which has been the main invitation of Conversations with God from the very first page of that 9-book series. It is in this way, by remembering who we really are, that we can find inner peace during this time of outer turmoil, demonstrating with others the sure and certain truth of our true identity. If you've read Conversations with God, you know there are 3 basic wisdoms that run through the entire CWG dialogue. Those 3 messages are: we are all one, there's enough, and see the perfection. Each of us is being invited by this outbreak to enter into and become part of, and thus to expand, the demonstration and the experience of those wisdoms. So we see that the effect is circular. We've already looked at the first insight, we are all one, and how that's being made real right now for us, and how it's also being demonstrated. The second message, there's enough, tells us that our illusion, I'm going to say, of insufficiency, even in this moment, when for many of us experience that we don't maybe have as much as we would like to have of all the things we need, that even that is an illusion. That is the idea that there's not enough. Yet the opportunity has rarely been greater than it is now, all around the world, to demonstrate this, to make this truth a reality. This we can do through individual decisions to offer whatever help we may be able to offer to someone who may be facing more of a dire circumstance than we ourselves are now facing. Let me give you some examples. Do you have a favorite waitress who will never forget receiving that envelope in the mail at the restaurant where no one is anymore? And she opens the envelope and she finds a little Tide Me Over from one of her favorite customers? Is there a tenant who may be leasing a home or a property or a business location from you that you temporarily want to reduce their rent or maybe even suspend payments for a while during these difficult economic times? Or is there someone who may be owing you some money for whom you want to do the same thing? Just say, you know what? Take your time. I understand what's going on. You can pay me back later. Is there a person who might be living alone right now who would appreciate more than you might ever know receiving that FaceTime call that you were planning on making tomorrow? Now we see that demonstrating sufficiency creates sufficiency, even as oneness creates oneness. Okay, now to message number 3. We're hearing a lot these days about social distancing, but my son said something the other day that really caught my ear and put this into context for me. My son Nicholas said, isolation does not have to mean disconnection. And by total non-coincidence, the next day on CNN, network commentator Brian Stelter made the exact same point. He said we shouldn't call it social distancing, we should call it physical distancing, and use all the technologies available to us, like the technology I'm using right now, to stay social, even if we have to stay home, so we can still, as my son would say, stay connected. Everywhere I look, I'm seeing how this global situation is providing every human being with a chance to evidence those 3 wisdoms, that we are all one, and to experience that there's enough. The self-quarantine that we have placed ourselves in, many of us, is showing us that this is true. Seen through that lens of CWG, we can observe that the lockdown in many places around the planet is perfect in the sense that it's producing some remarkable environmental observations. Did you know that? I just saw on the internet that the waterways of Venice are turning clear for the first time in decades. As well, satellite pictures of the atmosphere over our major population areas is becoming less and less polluted, with fewer cars and fewer planes playing their effect on the environment. Will these real-life, real-time observations awaken us to a striking awareness of the impact of our activities on this planet? Maybe even a greater awareness than all the speeches by all the teenage activists in the world could ever do? Time will tell. And you will tell. Because you will be part of those people who determine where we go from here. Oh, and by the way, as difficult and challenging and, of course, tragic as this outcome has been for many people, I did see something that really touched me on the internet, on Facebook a few days ago. It was labeled Special Bulletin. And here's what it said. Breaking news. Getting outdoors has not been canceled. Music has not been canceled. Family has not been canceled. Singing has not been canceled. Laughing has not been canceled. And hope has not been canceled. I smiled ear to ear when I saw that on the internet. And it's in moments such as that that the better angels of our nature emerge, and we all surrender to the calling of our innermost self. And that calling is the desire of the innermost self to express its originating energy, which is, of course, love. Our invited spiritual response to this spiritual experience now in progress on our planet. During this uncertain time, decide to become not just the watcher of events, but the creator of outcomes. From little outcomes like how well or fear-free this evening is going to go in your own house, to larger outcomes like how the elderly lady down the block is going to be able to get that package in off her porch, sprayed with disinfectant first and totally free of any virus. To even bigger outcomes than that, like how your city could be made safer from the unconscious spread of this virus by your decision to, in fact, self-isolate, to, listen to all the requests for physical distancing, if not necessarily social distancing. And then maybe we could even produce ultimately the most wonderful outcome at all, the death of this virus itself, through all the thoughtful and love-filled actions of this single community that we have become, acting together without fear. Let's allow this present circumstance on earth to generate conversations with God within all of us that bring each of us closer than ever to the divine. And let it also turn words into actions which demonstrate that we are more aware than ever before of the divine that lives within each other. Let the awareness of our singularity, that is, of our oneness, cause something else to go viral. We can make this idea go viral. Our truth that we are made of love, and that part of us, which is a one-word definition of our soul, love, will never die. We will live forever, whatever occurs on the earth right now. So we can, in fact, use these events to produce one step closer in the evolution of our species. I hope you'll choose to see it that way and to use the messages of Conversations with God and all the other spiritual inspirations you can receive from many sources to, in fact, move all of us in that direction. Are you with me? Okay.